الثقافية واتسمت قومية هذه المرحلة بالليبرالية والانفتاح. Everybody with me? Okay, I'm just reading and going on with reading. أما المرحلة الثانية وتمتد إلى طيلة النصف الأول من القرن العشرين، فهي مرحلة القومية السياسية، حيث برزت مطالب الاستقلال والتحرر، واتسمت قومية هذه المرحلة ببداية النزوع نحو الراديكالية. Okay, so interesting that he tie here the second stage, or the first stage is interesting or as well. It introduces this component of being open to the outside world and assuming a liberal kind of dynamic world view. Yeah, and the second is the political nationalism, قومية سياسية, which called for liberation from the Ottoman Empire and colonialism. Okay, and verged towards the radical worldview. In this case, we're talking about the socialist or Marxist to various degrees. أما المرحلة الثالثة فتمتد من حوالي منتصف القرن العشرين، يعني 1950s after 1950 وحتى عام 1973، وخلالها أصبحت القومية العربية ذات شعبية بالغة ومسيطرة على الساحة السياسية والفكرية العربية. It's interesting that here the description of this phase is one ذات شعبية بالغة ومسيطرة على الساحة السياسية والفكرية. It was that nationalism became something popular. Yeah, but this is being popular as a dynamic is different from being how do you say systemic and causational. Yeah, it means it was appealing to the masses, and we explained that I think in the last session that part of Abdel Nasser's appeal was that he came after the Nakba, and being also a soldier during the Nakba, came back to a system in which he and his commanders kind of concluded that there was something wrong with the political system, and not necessarily per se with performance of the military on the ground. Yeah, so this therefore there's an appeal to kind of returning al-izza wal-karami, which are feelings, abstract feelings, which are part of the social and cultural fabric and dignity, collective dignity, but it's not say a causational instrumentalist way of producing a new reality. It is rather compensating for something lost. Yeah, and in this way, Jamal Abdel Nasser, his appeal was maybe to the few selected few who were thinking about and practicing and planning for a pan-Arab nationalism. Most of the people, rest of the people were kind of appealing or kind of attracted to this dynamic that, yes, this is the one who will kind of restore our dignity between ourselves and amongst the rest of the world, if there is this sort of view. Yeah, which is more emotional or kind of how would you say, emotional or having to do with the person. Okay, yeah, they needed that, but the thing is that then Rima said that they needed this kind of fill the gap. Yeah, But the problem with filling the gap is that you do not produce a new reality, you just fill the gap. And there's a difference between kind of having a causational sequence of events between the past, present, and future, rather than filling a gap of a past and then kind of redefining your future, and then you start your future after you've reached that rebalancing of the gap, that there's no gap. Yeah, it's a different way of how one views the past, the present, and the future. If you're filling the gap, you're trying to compensate for something that happened in the past, and then you would begin a different trajectory based on being satisfied, how would you say, existentially, or as a being. Yeah, it's a different form to try to use the past, learn from the past, and make it work for you in the present, so that you are able to plan in the future. Yeah, so you analyze the past and extract some sort of causation, and make the past be a causation of understanding the present. So therefore, you dissect the present in a different way than just kind of describing it. You are kind of trying to understand what made the present in its in the dynamics. And therefore, when you understand that, then you kind of are more conscientious and more conscious about what you're trying to do in the future and where you want to reach to. This kind of connection, sequential connection and causational connection, is something that was lacking or was not very articulated in detail in the thought process of what it meant to be, what nationalism under Abdel Nasser was. And therefore, but then there's the response to Jamal Abdel Nasser's nationalism, pan-Arab nationalism, is that you have the Ba'ath Party. And we'll come to the Ba'ath Party. Abdel Nasser is not considered radical or perspective. It has characteristics of radical, but it is not radical according to what we've described before in the early sessions at the beginning of the semester. There needs to be a well thought out process, as well as a development of the awareness of the people, and the people then become part of a whole process which is has within it an ideology, and the role of ideology here is that it provides some sort of rationale and rationality about how things can emerge and develop and evolve. Similar to the diagram of Tilly, but on a more fluid level, not very institutionalized. So what the Ba'ath Party then comes and through Aflaq, yeah, in some ways you can argue that Jamal Abdel Nasser, according to the nationalism, how it was perceived in the general aspect, was to trying to fill the gap of defeat and humiliation. But that is not what that is. How there are two parts of it: how he was perceived and what he was working on. Okay, so we're talking about filling the gap, how he was perceived. What he was working on was a bit different, and we will come to that when we come to the documents about the non-aligned movement, the establishment of the non-aligned movement, and the اتحاد الجمهوريتين, Syria and Egypt, and then اتحاد الدول العربية, الدول العربية المتحدة. You have these at the end of the anthology, but we'll come to them in this session, but a bit later. Okay. So the point, yeah. So there isn't one way when we look at when we try to analyze nationalism in the Arab world in this region. It is there's no one one line of a coherent analysis. So there are different kind of dynamics working on, and the intellectuals and thinkers are still trying to figure out how these fit together. And one of the reasons why I have this article in the anthology is that even towards the end of this discussion between the Choueiri and the other author, and Khal Hroub, who is the kind of the narrator and the presenter of the is that there's kind of a leap. Remind me of the leap before we finish this session. In the causation. Causational sequence of the analysis on Arab nationalism. I've typed this so that you remind me. Okay. طيب. then المرحلة الرابعة أو المرحلة الثالثة فتمتد من حوالي منتصف القرن العشرين وحتى 73. I think we read this. وخلالها أصبحت القومية العربية ذات شعبية بالغة ومسيطرة على الساحة السياسية والفكرية والعربية. Okay. So the popularity of this kind of triggered or activated the thinkers. Yeah. Which is one direction of that the thinkers become attuned to what is being popular by say the larger population or larger group of people in the region. At some point, the thinkers need to kind of be able to form and shape the identity or the awareness of the population, and not just be reactive to what is popular. Otherwise, it becomes like a supply and demand. What is popular, then you think about it. If it's not popular, you do not think about it. And this kind of defeats the purpose if you're trying to establish or try to build towards a new or a different type of future or reality. It is not always popular to build a new reality which is kind of just or beneficial for the whole in the long run. Okay. And then المرحلة الرابعة والحالية اللي هي الحالية في 2002 اللي هي بروز نوع من القومية الجديدة تعطي الديمقراطية وحقوق الإنسان والمجتمع المدني اهتماما أكبر من ذي قبل. وكان الهدف الأكبر للقومية العربية ولا زال بروز نوع من القومية الجديدة أو بروز ولا يزال بروز نوع من بروز تحقيق الوحدة العربية الكبرى في المحيط من المحيط للخليج وبناء دولة واحدة ربما يكون اسمها الولايات العربية المتحدة. Now the term ولايات عربية متحدة is the plan of Jamal Abdel Nasser in the 50s. So we will come to that. So this is not a new term, but as if there is trying to establish this, but by other means, which is more civil society based rather than political state evolution or development phase. Yeah. Which in fact is Arab nationalism, isn't it, Maher? I'm not sure at this point. I'll answer that. We will see as we develop, go more into the material. Pan-Arabism and more Arab nationalism. Well, here you will have first. Being pan-Arab is looking from the locality into the region. Okay, Arab nationalism means that you are of the region, and then it reconfigures everything in the locality. So there, it's the terms have two different dynamics. Okay. So, and if you're going for pan-Arabism, you need to then be politically in control of the region. If one is to think in sequence, and therefore be able to reshape the identity of the citizen into a pan-Arab citizen, which means that then therefore there are no states. There's one big state, or one federal state in which there are smaller states, but sub-states which do not have access to or do not represent themselves as individual entities within the Pan-Arabism. No, they're part of the Pan-Arab, which represents them internationally. And this, we will see what this means in the details of the Jumhuriyya Al-Arabiyya Al-Muttahida, the document. Okay. And then there's more explanation about the ثورة ضباط الأحرار اللي هي ثورة يوليو في 52. And therefore there were conflicts with the communists and the Islamists and the Ba'athiyin. Okay. Why would there be conflict between the communists and the Islamicists and the Ba'athiyin? One part is that the whole idea of communism is that there will be an international class of workers which will unite, and therefore you counter the rationality of having a state in a locality. Okay. With the Ba'athi, even though they're socialist or maybe Marxist, but not communist in that sense, is that they go more for an ideology or a way of thinking and a way of analyzing extracted from Marxian analysis, which then how to say, triggers in the human being the capacity of agency. Agency meaning the capability and ability and willingness to change one's reality and be a force of change in one's reality. And this is what Marxism provides in its analysis of the dialectic, in its component of the antithesis, the tadad, and the dynamics of the whole ideology, that why would you need a whole class of proletariats to unite so that they become the political system in and of themselves, which is a kind of a development from what Rousseau called of being part of the French Revolution, a republic. The republic, yeah, is that every person within the republic is an activist, an active revolutionary within the republic, and the republic is a collective atmosphere, or how do you say, composition, political environmental composition, which nurtures and enhances activism from the individual within a collective context. Now, citizenship is something that tries to break away from giving how to say, giving more power to agency of the individual, so that the system is able to control the person rather than the individual affect the system. And if there's an individual or a group of people who affect the system, it is from down up as part of a liberal approach in modifying the system, rather than changing or bringing down the system and creating something new. Yeah. So in a sense, the Nasserism wanted to build something new. But how people saw what he was doing is different from what he was actually aiming towards, not in terms of the end result, so to speak, or the end goal in the perceptive sense, but rather in what it meant in the details, in the finer details, and in the mechanisms and causality. So, is citizenship in general development of nationalism or after? Well, you can go to citizenship to the classical Greek or old ancient Greece, and then there's the citizen, yeah. But if you are talking about the modern citizen as in the development of the citizen in modern Europe in the 19th, after the French Revolution, it is a different. It has a different dynamic, which has to do with how the systems readjusted themselves to survive after the French Revolution, and so therefore citizenship if it's a revolutionary sense, it has a different function than the citizenship in a say constitutional monarchy, which tries to maintain allegiance to the monarch and the political system, and enables the citizen to participate in the functions of the or policies of the state, provided that the citizen adheres to certain rules and regulations, such as paying taxes and doing the national duties and all these things. Whereas if you're talking about a citizen of the revolution, then therefore your agency is much more how to say, maximized than would normally be under the constitutional monarch system. When we come to this region, we have monarchies and maybe some republics, but the republics are not really republics in the revolutionary sense. They may have emerged as revolutionary at some point, but then evolved into being some sort of assuming anarchistic or monarchistic characterizations, such as trying to be a president for 20, 30 years for lifelong, and then trying to pass on that presidency to the siblings, to the sons, which is kind of not radical in the radical sense, yeah. And in the legal sense, the citizenship would have then different legal connotations depending on what the political system is, whether it's a republican or revolutionary, or whether it is a liberal constitutional monarchy. Okay. And the Ba'athiyin, yeah, well, I didn't answer the Ba'athiyin. Why the Ba'athiyin? Because Nasserism did not provide an ideology. Okay, you cannot say that Nasserism was an ideology. It was kind of something that happened. It was a development. Excuse me. Yeah, it was something that evolved out of political and historical circumstances post World War I, Nakba, and that kind of sequence of events, as well as trying to counter colonialism and freedom movements. But the Ba'athi tried, the Ba'ath, why they call the Ba'ath party, Hizb al-Ba'ath, is that the term indicates that there is that by being part of a party, there is an ideology, and therefore there's a rationale of how you understand or rationalize or analyze the past, and what the present dynamics are, and what the future would then be. And therefore it's kind of taking in this Western adaptation of how to make causation work for you, and being part of a causational process and sequence of events. Okay. And why the Islamist is because that the Islamic movement wanted to assume power, and therefore was not and therefore wanted an Islamic system or to be kind of implemented. The difference between Nasser and or the differences between Abdel Nasser's approach and the Islamists was that Abdel Nasser was looking on a global scale, in addition, or international scale, as well as regional and local, whereas the Islamists were looking more on towards a local, immediate setting. Okay. Okay, there was a movement of القومية العربية, yeah. The Arab national movement, yes, القوميين العرب, which was from Syria, which had some sort of it was more progressive in the sense that it kind of diminished the role of the states and focused on kind of uniting the people under a particular identical thought process, which would then reconfigure or reshape the identity into a more pan-Arabic session, but pan-Arab context, but without relying on a dynamic or charismatic person such as Abdel Nasser. Yeah, and the whole point of the Ba'ath Party in Syria and Iraq was that they didn't want to rely on the personification of or they didn't want the mass to. They saw that there was a problem with identifying a whole political program with one person. If the person leaves or fails, therefore you lose the popular support and the popular appeal. Whereas if you are more an ideology or more a thought representative dynamic or group, which makes people think and analyze in a particular way their reality and predicaments, it has a different dynamic to it in which that it can sustain and withstand shocks from losing or missing individuals. And this is the appeal or the attraction of the Marxist approach and socialist approach in this region, was that it provided a mechanism of how to analyze the past, how to identify where the problems are, identify what needs to be changed, and therefore generate and build a system, a structure within the party and its branches, which could then be kind of manifested after liberation into institutionalized bodies such as foreign relations, Ministry of Commerce, and the sort, based on how the political party is configured and arranged. So therefore, there's a continuity that. What Tilly and Khafaji argued, that most states suffered from wars and crisis, but for the Europe was faster to reshape. Oh, okay. Yeah, we will come to this when we talk about Aflaq. Is that there's Tilly is using the war making and state making more integrated than what seems to have happened in the Arab region, and that has partly to do with that some of the way the states of the region emerged is that some states emerged out of colonization and liberated, and got liberation, but through struggle, and other states were given independence, provided there would be allegiance or certain attachments and privileges to the colonizers. Okay, so within that context, you have two kind of within the region you have the seeds of any counter-revolutionary dynamic as well as a revolutionary dynamic, And this is some of the aspects which the states that evolved after World War, after Sykes-Picot and the emergence of the Arab League, was that the Arab League had, as we mentioned before, had 5 members, and they were all monarchies. You had Saudi Arabia, Transjordan, Hashemite Syria, Hashemite Iraq, and Farouk's Egypt. So the initial Arab League was made of was a product of the British initiative, which brought in all the counter-revolutionary dynamics within the region. When you have the military coup or revolution of the revolutionary of the officers, in 1952, led by Jamal Abdel Nasser, then you have within the Arab League a revolutionary surrounded by what was initially counter-revolutionary. And this kind of complicates the idea what pan-Arab means. Are you a revolutionary component, or are you kind of adapting the definition of politics in Arabic as sasa yasusu, which is kind of accommodate what is there, not create your new version of future and reality. Okay. Yeah, the difference between evolution of modern nation states or modern states in Europe is that most of their capital, the resources, the credit in making war was not amongst themselves. It was making war unrivaling each other in outside continental Europe. So there's the interesting note is that from after the defeat of Napoleon in 1815 and at Waterloo until the Franco-Prussian War, there was no war in Europe, which is kind of indicative that where there were conflicts between the British and the French and the Spanish and others, it was in the colonies, and the colonies were the ones that kind of compensated for for building such a intricate political system, which could then kind of entice or encourage and attract people to become citizens of the state by the benefits that were coming from the colonies. In the Arab region, there is no colonization you're being colonized. You're not the one who is colonizing another group. And therefore, that is where the analysis kind of goes into the different trajectories when you compare or when you analyze what happened in Europe and what happened in this region. Okay, you cannot use Tilly. It is difficult to use Tilly to kind of explain what is happening in this region and the Arab world. You can use Tilly to try to understand how the Zionist state emerged, yes, but then that is part of the mechanism of the Western way of building states, war making and state making. If you're following Tilly's argument, in this region, you can say that what substitutes war making is liberation, and revolt and struggle. And now that could be a factor in reshaping. But then you then have to assume that if it's to evolve into something in a Tillian version, you would need a continuity in revolution from colonization and neocolonialism and the neo-neos hegemonies and other forms of dominance through globalization. So you'd need to. If you want to work on that dynamic, you would need to work on having an active throughout the generations, from one generation passing on to the other, this kind of dynamic that you want to be free, but it's free is not a stage, it's also a state of being. So therefore, you need to always be active in manifesting or reaching towards your freedom. And after even you've reached your freedom, you're active towards maintaining that freedom. Not just kind of saying, okay, well, I've done my, it becomes something of the past achievement, and then we can go and become loosely liberal, or kind of, how to say, go on to other things without kind of maintaining the spirit of trying to maintain a freedom. Yeah. Is everything okay, or do you need a break? Okay, Maher's question about direct rule. When we go to Khafaji, then he kind of talks about that more. Yeah, but it's an open question as well. It is not just something that one can answer. It's something that has to be worked on. Your question about how to install the direct rule and whether direct rule can be applied to the region. That is what Jamal Abdel Nasser was trying to do when he proposed اتحاد الدول العربية. That there would be one rule, but in a more we will come to the details. It's quite a sophisticated form of direct rule, because it involves sub-levels of indirect until it could emerge into some sort of direct rule at on the singular level or more direct level. Okay. So to continue. We have there's a key question on the first page. You count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 from the bottom. بل قائم السؤال الكبير أين الحل ولماذا لم يتوحد العرب. So these key questions. Okay, so within all this 4 stages, how do you proceed? What is the solution? And why haven't the Arabs united? Okay, or why hasn't Pan-Arabism worked? So in order to understand this, we need to go to more about what went on in the past 70 years at least. So if we talk about, we'll go into Abdel Nasser's projects. What he was involved in and trying to build in the 50s, from the non-aligned movement to the Republic, the Syrian Arab Republic, and the United Arab States. For this, excuse me. For this, we would need to go to the end of the anthology. You have some sort of some sheets from Wikipedia about the مؤتمر Bandung Conference and الجمهورية العربية المتحدة, and then after that the الدول العربية المتحدة. If you can find them, they're before الفكر السياسي والاجتماعي, which is the last section of the anthology that you have, or Okay, so you backtrack. There, I don't think there's a page, but page number. But there are three consecutive documents, and they come after States and Sovereignty in the Middle East by Louise Fawcett. So I'll give you a few minutes to check on that. You go from the end and backtrack. You need to go maybe around 15 to 20 pages back from the back. Yes, قبل الجمهورية العربية المتحدة there's also مؤتمر باندونغ. After Louise Fawcett, yes, exactly, yes. Okay. Everybody with me on this page. We will go this page, then the الجمهورية العربية المتحدة, and then we will go to the الدول العربية المتحدة. Okay, everybody with me? Okay, so keep a marker on where we left from. The article at the beginning, kind of tilt the page or bend the page so that you are able to flip back and forth. Okay. The Bandung Conference is the conference that established the non-aligned movement in 1955, in April 1955. Okay. Now the founders of there were three founders. There was Jamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt, Tito of Czechoslovakia, and Nehru of India. Okay. And the whole idea was that during the Cold War that there would be another reference to a future which was not a capitalist in the Western sense, and not communist under the domination of the Soviet USSR, the Soviet Union. That there would be another future trajectory which would evolve from those countries and peoples that were under colonization, under colonialism, or had liberated from colonialism and wanted a different future. So the non-aligned movement would be a movement that would also support peoples and states and peoples that are struggling to against colonialism and to liberate themselves and to establish statehood. Okay, so we will read just the first few lines at the top, and then مبادئ ومؤتمر باندونغ. It says at the end, but the points come on the second page. Okay, so عقد مؤتمر باندونغ بذراع القوة، والذي حضره وفود 29 دولة إفريقية وآسيوية، واستمر لمدة 6 أيام، وكان النواة الأولى لنشأة الحركة عدم الانحياز. هذا في 21 أبريل 1955. وعقد في مدينة باندونغ الإندونيسية عام 55، وشارك فيه الرئيس عبد الناصر بالإضافة إلى رئيس وزراء الهند جواهر نهرو وجوزيف تيتو رئيس يوغوسلافيا يوغوسلافيا not Czechoslovakia. الرئيس السوداني إسماعيل الأزهري وجبهة التحرير الوطني كملاحظ. وتبنى المؤتمر مجموعة من القرارات لصالح القضايا العربية وضد الاستعمار. مبادئ مؤتمر باندونغ كانت الصفحة التالية. لم تحل الانتماءات السياسية المتعارضة بين الدول الحضور في باندونغ، أو لم تحل الانتماءات السياسية المتعارضة بين الدول الحضور في باندونغ دون صياغة 10 مبادئ تعد ميثاقا للعلاقات بين الدول، ومن أهمها احترام حقوق الإنسان، سيادة جميع الدول ووحدتها، عدم التدخل في شؤونها، وتسوية المنازعات بالطرق السلمية، وتنمية المصالح المتبادلة بينها وبالتعاون. ونتج عن مؤتمر باندونغ توطيد العلاقات الشخصية بين بعض زعماء الدول والحضور. فقد كان باندونغ أول رحلة للرئيس المصري جمال عبد الناصر خارج مصر بعد نجاح ثورة يوليو. فتوطدت العلاقات بينه وبين الزعيم الهندي نهرو. حركة عدم الانحياز ترجع تسمية عدم الانحياز إلى خطاب ألقاه نهرو في أبريل 55، حيث رأى أن عدم الانحياز هوية مستقلة ودورا إيجابيا نشطا، وليس موقفا سلبيا إزاء التكتلات الخارجية. ومع امتداد النصف منوقف على السطر هذا. التعريف عدم الانحياز ترجع تسمية عدم الانحياز إلى خطاب نهرو اللي عرف who identified the non-alliance as being it is not just an identity, it is or an independent identity, but it's also an active a positive active contribution، وليس موقفا سلبيا إزاء التكتلات الخارجية. And it is not just antagonistic towards outside alliances or groups or groupings of states. Which means, how is this different from what we began in the first paragraph? Anyone? In terms of identity. Yes, independent, yes. I'm just waiting for, there are two, Amal and Nariman are typing, so I will just wait and see what comes out. That nobody can force them on something, they can run their own country, maybe. Yeah, that's part of it, but it's also much deeper than that. They are from different regions and from different history, yes, but nonetheless that they would have a future, work towards a common future. But they want the same political future. Yeah, but then how do they identify themselves if they want a political combination of cultures? Yes. not to intervene. Yeah, this is from the principles, some of the principles, but they're also anti-colonial. So I'm just waiting. There are 3 people typing. So demand for liberation, yes, but then under what view? The focus was to establish an identity which isn't impacted by outside. Yes, Maher. Yes. The idea here is that they do not define themselves by being counter something, and therefore we talked about earlier that one of the problems of settler colonial peoples or settlers is that they need to they define themselves by having something the antithesis of them, which is antagonistic. Yeah. And therefore, if you lose the counterpart or your enemy or your opponent, therefore you lose your identity. Here, it is the identity is much deeper than just the interaction with the counter or with the antagonist, and therefore it maintains the integrity of the identity. And it puts it on a level which is much deeper than then reacting to colonialism. So therefore, you're not defined by colonialism, as maybe Ernest Renan would talk in the article which we in the first article which we're analyzing, and it's not by the. It is not that you are defined by tadad, the counter. The tadad doesn't define you. It is one of your traits and one of maybe your activities, but it's not. It also may shape you, but it does not exclusively define you, so that you become dependent on having an opponent all the time. One of the problems of the Cold War narrative between the East and the West, and was that, say, the West, at least the Western narrative, relied heavily on having an evil other, the Soviet Union, and therefore it developed its narrative and communication, and it's how it's identified itself by having an other that represents what is totally opposite of what you are. Being you, the West being perceived as good, and then the East as being the communist East as being all that is evil. And therefore, when the Soviet Union collapses in the beginning of the 90s, they need Samuel Huntington comes to fill in the gap of what the Western identity is without the Soviet Union, and therefore it needs to find a new antagonist. So we will come to this later, but this is kind of a touching point. So we're coming back to the non-aligned movement. It kind of went. It was not a reaction to something, and it was an initiative to try to consolidate what was going on in the colonies of trying to liberate, and to provide a future which would be different, but maintaining that there would be the identities or the collective identities of those who are part of the non-aligned movement would remain intact, in the sense that they wouldn't be defined by who they are fighting or who they are up against. They have their own identity, and then there is an activity of maybe liberating or removing colonization and neo-colonial aspects and controls over states, but not being defined or shaped by the other. I'm reading Mu'tasim's note. But then the subtle colonial identities are established through negation, Patrick Wolf, which is very relevant to if we consider the Arab world. Yeah, but not all of the Arab world was subject to settler colonial dynamic. the Arab world in general was subject to colonialism, but different versions, different intensities of colonialism. In Algiers and in Libya and in Egypt, you had direct colonialism, which confrontation, bloody confrontations, and in Yemen as well. But say in Saudi Arabia and maybe the other areas in the Gulf, they didn't go through that bloody transition from being colonized to having states. It was more as a result of agreement rather than fighting. Yeah. So therefore, you have also in the historical, in the pan-Arab, if you want to call it a pan-Arab sense, you have different experiences of history with regard to colonialism. You have one view which considers previously colonizing powers as now partners in regulating or organizing the region, and then you have those who still consider the colonizing or colonizers as being antagonistic, and therefore a party to always be cautious of and in the local and international and regional dealings and relations. Okay. And now we go to جمهورية العربية المتحدة. We will read the first paragraph of the first page, and then we will go to المراسلات الأمم المتحدة, which is at the bottom of the third page of this document. Okay. So now, what is interesting to note, if you want to write this down as a note in the first article, is that you have ثورة ضباط الأحرار في 52. مؤتمر Bandung, non-aligned conference of Bandung is in 1955. And then جمهورية العربية المتحدة, the United Arab Republic, is in 58, in February 58. And then just less than a month later, at the 8th of March, you have the United Arab States. So within a span of 5 years, 6 years, within a span of 6 years, you have Abdel Nasser catapulting from a local military commander or regiment, taking over a monarchy in revolting against the monarchy in Egypt, and therefore going into international stature with the non-aligned movement. So therefore, moving from the local to the to the international, and then back to the regional, with the pan-Arab aspect. So there is this kind of 3 levels, which if you go to the first sheet of the course, which مفاهيم العلوم السياسية, you have the 9 levels. So he begins from within the state of the monarchy, takes over the state and changes the whole political system into a revolutionary republic, and therefore catapults then, or is able to jump to be one of the key representatives and founders of the non-aligned movement on an international level. And then comes back with trying to manifest that clout, that influence which he has acquired in phenomenal time, to try to develop something on the regional level in terms of the Arab world. Yeah, but the non-aligned is also African, as well as Asian, as well as Latin American and South American. So there is also all these colonized entities are in group, and therefore there's a sort of culture of global vision that is kind of emerging within the non-aligned movement, yet maintaining the differences and the specific experiences of those who are in the group. Okay, so with that he comes with the non-aligned establishment. He comes then to propose the Jamhuriya Al-Arabiya Al-Muttahida, okay, which is a unification of two republics. Yeah, two states which have a pan-Arab kind of vision. The Egypt being a Nasserist version, and then the Syrian being more a party type. So I will read just. الجمهورية العربية المتحدة هو الاسم الرسمي للوحدة بين مصر وسوريا، والتي كانت بداية لتوحيد الدول العربية. طيب، التي كانت إحدى أحلام الرئيس جمال عبد الناصر. أعلنت الوحدة في 22 فبراير 58 بتوقيع ميثاق جمهورية المتحدة من قبل الرئيسين السوري شكري القواتلي والمصري جمال عبد الناصر. اختير عبد الناصر رئيسا والقاهرة عاصمة الجمهورية الجديدة. وفي عام 1960 تم توحيد برلمان البلدين في مجلس الأمة بالقاهرة، وألغيت الوزارات الإقليمية لصالح الوزارة الموحدة في القاهرة أيضا. ونهيت الوحدة بانقلاب عسكري في دمشق يوم 28 سبتمبر 61. طيب, it's interesting what processes are going through within this dynamic. Okay, you have two republics who are uniting, but you can only have one leader within the republic. So who has more clout? It would be Jamal Abdel Nasser. But why would say Shukri al-Quwatli be willing to engage in such dynamic, so as to kind of sort of dissolve into the political system, a unified political system in which Jamal Abdel Nasser is the leader. Okay, so what would be? Remember, 58 is after the war of 1956, in which the Israelis, the British, and the French were involved in trying to recapture the Suez and to make it international waters again, after Jamal Abdel Nasser had nationalized the Suez. So it has to do with the French being involved and having influence over Syria at the time, and because he emerged, he survived the 56 war and was representing a whole cluster or a group of alliance in the non-aligned movement. Therefore, it was merging within the Egyptian was not merging on the level of Syria and Egypt. It was merging on the level of Syria being a former colony or still under the influence of the French, and Egypt having stood up to the British colonizers, as well as his stature and standing in an international body of the non-aligned movement. And therefore, if you talk about positions of power, through Abdel Nasser or through the Nasserist Egypt, Egypt had a standing much more expanded than, say, Syria. Egypt being also a member of the African States, Organization of African States, which we talked about before, or shall talk about later on as well, and also being part of the non-aligned movement, which grouped together formerly colonized states as well as republics of in the Soviet Union, such as Yugoslavia. and therefore there became one parliament in 1960, centered in Cairo, and then therefore ministries of the ministries within Syria kind of were dissolved, and then became subsequent to the system in Egypt. Now, what is the background of Shukri al-Quwatli? If anybody knows. Or what was his profession? Which also has a factor into why there was this kind of maturity to kind of merge with the political system of Egypt. Ba'ath Party, yeah, but not only Ba'ath Party. He was also a military man. He was and therefore in the military there can only be one commander. Okay, one supreme commander, and therefore, if it were a civilian person, then there probably would be more debate about why you and why not me and all that. But here there's a larger goal, which has local, regional, and international consequences and implications, and therefore he Quwatli kind of succumbed to and accepted that Jabran Abdel Nasser would be most suitable to lead this initiative, and therefore he would be, as a military person and responsible of a region, Quwatli would be setting an example. And the idea here was that if you are of the same ideology, you should be able to, if you have the same goal and the same kind of world view or intentions, that therefore you should be able to unite and not divide. The Ba'ath Party comes as a result after the breakup and develops more into no, the Ba'ath Party is there, not since the mid-50s as well. So therefore, the Ba'ath kind of as an ideologically founded and way of viewing how to connect the activities of the past and learn from the past and become active in the present and bring in different future and make your own future, merged with a charismatic person like Abdel Nasser, with the idea that it could both Jamal Abdel Nasser could benefit from the Ba'athist methodology of analysis and ideological narrative and discourse, and the Ba'athists would benefit from Jamal Abdel Nasser by making the Ba'athism more popular. So therefore, you would merge a charismatic person, leader of Pan-Arabism or Pan-Arab nationalism, with the Ba'athist component of being this kind of intellectually and having a discourse of its own, in which produces and maintains and relives, reactivates the whole struggle and strive towards Arab unity. Yes, military. He was a military person. He was a commander, and therefore the head of the Syrian Republic at the time. Okay. Now those who came and made a coup against him were also from the military. So, but then you have within the military you can have different spheres of influence. Yeah. But ideally, in the military, the military should be apolitical, should not be part of the political definition unless it's part of a revolutionary vision, in which you're restructuring, decolonizing, and liberating, and all that, in which you have to actively struggle, and you need to organize that struggle in terms of what the achievements should be, and how to muster and organize your resources to be able to do state building and liberation at the same time. But it's a different dynamic, yeah, than say the European, which is more okay. We do not want to interfere with other states, and we don't want to wage war with neighboring states because we're not yet ready to, and haven't achieved this state systematic or political system maturity to kind of wage war against neighbors. Okay, then we go to the last paragraph of the third page of the same جمهورية العربية المتحدة, and we read the correspondence of Egypt to the UN. Now, when you merge two states and they become one, there are implications on the international level and representation. So, if we read مراسلات الأمم المتحدة في رسالة مؤرخة في 24 شباط 58 أبلغ وزير الخارجية الجمهورية العربية المتحدة الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة بإنشاء مصر وسوريا لدولة واحدة. This is revolutionary in that sense. So why? It breaks up the Sykes-Picot configuration of post World War I. Now, Iraq, we explained before that Iraq taking over Kuwait and making it part of Iraq was one later aspect of which affected the Sykes-Picot sense, in that it eliminated, let's say, a state, which would have implications on our case as well. But here they are merging not by takeover but by agreement. And therefore, two states become one, and therefore two political geographical entities, which are not connected, by the way, become united. وبعد ذلك في مذكرة مؤرخة في مارس 58 أبلغت وزارة الخارجية الجمهورية العربية المتحدة الأمين العام بما يلي: تجدر الإشارة إلى أن حكومة الجمهورية العربية المتحدة تعلن أن الاتحاد من الآن فصاعدا عضو واحد في الأمم المتحدة, and therefore both we have one representative in the UN, in the United Nations, ملتزم بأحكام ميثاق, وأن جميع المعاهدات والاتفاقيات الدولية التي أبرمتها مصر أو سوريا مع البلدان الأخرى ستظل سارية ضمن الحدود الإقليمية المنصوص عليها في إبرامها وفقا للمبادئ والقانون الدولي. So this is quite significant in that you have a precedent in the region in which two post-World War I configuration states become one. Here, the facilitating factors that they both had this pan-Arab or pan-Arab nationalistic view or goal, but even though they had different configurations internally, one was more about charismatic and popularity, and the other one was more methodological and causational in how they presented the problem and how to proceed. And the causational part will come when we will come. I'll explain it more when we come to Aflaq, Michel Aflaq's article about nationalism. And then we come to the Dul Arabiya al-Muttahida, which is the document right after. This one we will read, or I'll read most of it because it's kind of significant, particularly the Nasl al-Ittifaqiyya, the components of the agreement of the unity between Egypt and Yemen, which was a kingdom at the time. But the unification was done with the son, with the prince, not the king. So therefore, which is kind of interesting as well. And at the time, Yemen was fighting for independence from the British, and it was controlled by the British. So the British had control over Egypt, so as to control the Suez, and needed to control Yemen, so as to control the exit from the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean and Asia. So therefore, you are talking about two key strategic land masses and political systems which are important for commercial, maritime, and military purposes of the British, the colonizing power. Okay, so الدول العربية, and the agreement between the الدول العربية المتحدة comes, which is the United Arab States, comes just less than a month after the الجمهورية العربية المتحدة. طيب، كانت اتحاد كونفدرالية قصير الأجل بين الجمهورية العربية المتحدة مصر وسوريا، اللي هي الدول العربية المتحدة اللي هي بدأت في الجمهوريتين، ومن ثم المملكة المتوكلة اليمنية من الأعوام 58 ل 61. في البداية كانت الجمهورية العربية المتحدة دولة ذات سيادة تشكلت من اتحاد مصر وسوريا في العام 58، وفي العام نفسه انضمت المملكة المتوكلية اليمنية شمال اليمن، التي وقعت بالفعل اتفاقية دفاع مع مصر إلى دولة جديدة في اتحاد كونفدرالية من إلى فضفاض يسمى الدول العربية المتحدة. كان أحد الأسباب التي أدت لاتخاذ هذا القرار هو خشية المملكة المتوكلية من المملكة العربية السعودية المجاورة ذات القوة والمساحة الأكبر. So here we kind of we are able to kind of identify, or it emerges the dynamics of the counter-revolutionary post-Sykes-Picot and those that emerge as revolutionary after changing the political system in Egypt from a Sykes-Picotian one to one that is has ambitions beyond the border configuration of the post-World War. So طيب، ورأت المملكة المتوكلة أن هذا القرار سيكون مصدر أمان لها. يعني why? If you're in Yemen, northern Yemen, and you're by population standards less, and in terms of area size much less than the capabilities of the Saudi Arabia, which is supported by the British and which is essentially a British production. Therefore, it would make sense for them to try to northern Yemen to try to align with somebody with a revolutionary or vision, who has done a unification with another state in the region, and also has clout or representation in the international level through the non-aligned movement. So therefore, it is not just a bilateral how would you say, view or perspective of relations. It has more. It's through the bilateral plugging into something that is international and regional. Okay. وظلت المملكة المتوكلية دولة ذات سيادة مستقلة، حيث حافظت على عضويتها في الأمم المتحدة وسفارتها طول فترة الاتحاد. طيب، ولم يحقق أهداف الكونفدرالية أهداف العروبة أو القومية العربية حيث حل في 61. طيب. But this sort of experimentation in what is possible is unique and rare in this region, which is why it is noteworthy. The other aspect is that Jamal Abdel Nasser, if you try to consider why he would make an alliance with, say, an Imara Mutawakkiliyya, or a Mamlaka al-Mutawakkiliyya, like a kingdom, it has to do with trying to promote the discourse or the narrative or the position that Arab nationalism is not confined to the ideologically like-minded political systems or parties. It could be also non-like or different political systems, a kingdom versus in conjunction with a republic, and therefore the idea is that the end goal or outcome, anticipated outcome or aspired outcome would reconfigure and redefine the relationships between even kingdoms and republics in the region in a way that would make it more provide more cohesion, even if the political systems were different. But how then do you kind of address the issue of centralizing the whole initiative or the whole program of achieving pan-Arab nationalism? Then it would come to the details of the agreement, Nass al-Ittifaqiyya, which are quite advanced for that stage, because it has implications about how you break up the political system or dismantle the political system, yet reassemble it into a larger regional political system, while not being threatening to the current region, to the current regimes that are there, that are different from the republics. So therefore, by setting an example with the Yemen, the kingdom, Mamlaka al-Mutawakkila, the monarchic system in Yemen, the idea was that, okay, the other kingdoms of the region have place in the common view of a pan-Arab nationalism, and therefore they would be able to maintain their how would you say, status in a sense within their own community, while delegating their sovereignty to the centralized political system. How this works out is in the details of the agreement, which are quite interesting. I'll just go through and highlight some of what is relevant. إنشاء اتحاد يسمى الدول العربية المتحدة، ليترك المجال أمام الدول الراغبة في الانضمام إليها على أن تحتفظ كل دولة بشخصيتها الدولية أو الدولية وبنظام الحكم الخاص بها. Therefore, they would have their characteristic representation in the international arena, but it remains to be seen whether that would mean in the UN that they would be as a separate, or would they be under the centralized, and that they would maintain their political system. So therefore, there's allowance for having a political system which is different than the republic within the confederation or the unity. Okay. The second, يكون مواطنو الاتحاد المتساوين في الحقوق والواجبات العامة. So therefore, all citizens of both would have equal standing under the law and have equal rights. So therefore, in this sense, you're talking about reshaping the citizen from a locality to a particular system, which are the beginnings of what would then have emerged as a centralized political system of the region. كما أن كل مواطن في حق العمل وتولي الوظائف العامة في البلاد المتحدة دون تفرقة. And therefore you could have exchange of labor power and profession acquisition, which is kind of interesting. Therefore you do not, the citizen is a citizen of the federal, not the locality of where they are. And therefore there would be mutual benefit economically as well as acquisition of professional skills in maintaining administrative status and planning, strategizing for the future in terms of development as well as other aspects. تباح حرية التنقل بين دول الاتحاد ضمن حدود القانون، وعلى أن تتبع الدول الأعضاء السياسية الخارجية الموحدة التي يضعها الاتحاد، ويتولى التمثيل السياسي والقنصلي له في هيئة واحدة في الأحوال التي يقرر فيها الاتحاد ذلك. So what does this mean? There would be one voice, official voice representing the unity in the international spheres. Now, whether there would be diplomatic representation of Yemen, such as in foreign countries, and whether the embassies would become diplomatic missions under the supervision of one consulate, would be something that was open for discussion and could be agreed upon later. يكون الاتحاد قوات مسلحة واحدة. Here is also important is that you would have one military army and one defense force. Yeah, it is. You wouldn't have two, and therefore you would have one training, one acquisition of strategy, and unified language of command. Usually, different armies have different discourses and terminologies of what commands mean and what the context of the command mean, and therefore you would have maybe some unifying this would expand the capabilities of defense and maintaining security from outside intervention as well as internal. Which and therefore under one unified command, rather than having two commands and therefore having to coordinate then the different languages and different ways of doing or implementing or achieving results. Okay. وتنظم الشؤون الاقتصادية. يكون للاتحاد قوات مسلحة واحدة، وتنظم الشؤون الاقتصادية وفقا لخطط مرسومة تهدف إلى تنمية الإنتاج والاستغلال الموارد الثروة الطبيعية وتنسيق النشاط الاقتصادي، على أن ينظم القانون فيما بعد شؤون النقد وكيفية الاتحاد الجمركية ومراحل وسائل تنسيق التعلم والثقافة في الاتحاد. Now it's interesting that in this point you have the joint forces, military forces, but you also the point right after that is how you organize your resources, the economic and the natural resources and the human resources and all resources, and under which direction and what planning and purpose they are coordinated towards, and how the economic activities work. So therefore, like in Tilly, you have the extraction, taxation, as well as redistribution. Here you have, with the kind of unified forces, you need resources to maintain both and deliver on having equal standing of both under the law and under the commands. And that the custom or goods transfer arrangements would be set later on. يشرف المجلس الأعلى مؤلف من رؤساء الدول والأعضاء على شؤون الاتحاد. المجلس الأعلى ويعاون المجلس الأعلى في مباشرة سلطته المجلس يسمى المجلس الاتحاد، ويشكل من عدد متساوي من ممثلي الدول الأعضاء، ويترك القانون أمر تحديد عدد أعضاء المجلس ومدة عضويتها والاحتكام الخاص بها. So here there are two bodies. The first body kind of maintains the regime of the locality and provides representation from them، اللي هي رؤساء الدول والأعضاء، اللي هو المجلس الأعلى. ويعاون المجلس الأعلى في مباشرة سلطاته مجلس يسمى المجلس الاتحاد. So therefore you have the Council of the Heads of States who are part of the Federation, and then you have the sub council of the council, the Council of the Unification of or the Unity Council, which will be then the Federation Council. And therefore, but the executive ويعاون المجلس الأعلى في مباشرة سلطته بمجلس ما يسمى مجلس الاتحاد. بالتالي مجلس الاتحاد هو اللي بيستلم أمور التنفيذي، بينما رؤساء الدول هم مجلس رؤساء الدول هم بعطوا التوجه. ماشي. هلا مهم انه المجلس التنفيذي يكون مشترك، مش ما يكون مثلا تابع لو موالي للمنطقه اللي جاي منها، او مثلا الدول اللي جاي منها. فبالتالي the executive council, which is the Council of Unity or Unification, is the one that is actually doing the unified implementation based on the agreement of the Council of the heads of the states of the Federation. Yeah, and this is how you maintain the kings and heads of republics in one group, but it is the unified branch, the subcommittee, which is the executive committee, has the power to execute, is the one that is making sure that no state kind of favors its particular locality or its interests apart from the collective interest and collective advantage. Yeah. And therefore, and then the other one, تكون رئاسة الاتحاد بالتناوب بين الدول الأعضاء، وعلى الدولة التي تحل نوبتها أن ترشح من يتولى الرئاسة، على أن يكون للرئيس نائب أو نواب من الدولة أو الدول الأعضاء في الاتحاد. This point is very, how to say, is very intricate and sophisticated, in the sense that here's where you see how the sovereign power of the locality or the system is kind of traded for maintaining a representative in which the head of the Council of the States, federal states, is able to appoint, has a say in appointing a successor, but at the same time, gradually the whole sovereignty becomes a unified sovereignty of the whole federation, rather than a localized sovereignty as opposed to a centralized sovereignty. Sovereignty is gradually being kind of shifted towards the federation. The confederation, as opposed to from the locality, while maintaining symbolic statuses and privileges and of those who represent the localities, whether they are princes, kings, or heads of republics or heads of military. ويختص المجلس الأعلى برسم السياسة العليا للاتحاد في المسائل السياسية والدفاعية والاقتصادية والثقافية، وإصدار القوانين اللازمة في هذا الشأن، وتكون قراراته بالإجماع، ويعود للمجلس الحق في تعيين القائد العام للقوات المسلحة في الاتحاد. So the upper council, which is represents the representatives of the states within the confederation, have a say, are the ones who decide upon the collective political, defense, economic, and cultural aspects of the Confederation, and there should be a joint agreement. This is arrived by consensus. It is not by lobbying and partying, ideally, and therefore, but why one would understand? Okay, in the political sense, there would have to be unification and consensus, also in the military, the defense, and the economic. But why the cultural? It is part of what we talked about, is that you try to make you reconnect the past, present, and the future, so that it is a relational, causational dynamic that is lived and activated with individuals or citizens of this confederation having agency and throughout their political life and existence. It is not just a stage in which you achieve something and therefore you then say, okay, we've achieved liberation and therefore we don't have to be as active as before. We now focus on leisurely things or other aspects of political or non-political life. Here it is trying to maintain this culture that it is passed on from region to region and from generation to generation to withstand and withhold the ideal of achieving kind of freedom from and independence from outside intervention and colonization at the time, which was still prevalent at the time. Okay, in the 50s, it was the time in which, after the World War II, the main colonial powers were beginning to weaken. But they nonetheless had very, because it was a time of weakening colonial powers, the colonial powers were more ruthless in their trying to maintain their power over the colonized and the colonial colonies. تتبع مجلس الاتحاد ثلاثة هيئات، هي المجلس الدفاع والمجلس الاقتصاد والمجلس الثقافي، وتكون القوانين الاتحادية قوة إلزامية في البلاد المتحدة. بالتالي there are three bodies who emerge from the Higher Council, which is the Council for Defense, Council for Economic Council, and the Cultural Council. So therefore you have the relational power, the structural power in terms of credit production and providing security, as well as the knowledge council for the aspect of knowledge power. And therefore all laws and legislation are applied to all and should be adhered by all. ويعين رئيس كل دولة وزيرا لدى الدول العربية المتحدة يختص بالإشراف على تنفيذ قرارات الاتحاد في الإقليم الذي يتبعه. And therefore there would be a minister whose role would be to implement the directives of the Higher Council and these three subcommittees, sub-councils. Okay, and therefore it would be it wouldn't be somebody else coming to the locality. No, they would appoint a minister from the locality who would then implement this kind of reconfiguration of the political system from the centralized, the confederative, to the local, even though you may have still a king or a prince or a republic or a military leader. Okay. إلغاء التمثيل السياسي آخر بند. There's still a continuation. كما يعين رئيس كل دولة وزيرا نائبا عنه لدى رئيس أو رؤساء الدول الأخرى ويكون له صفة الوزراء المحليين. This is also interesting, is that each head of state would appoint a minister that would be in the other states. So therefore, which would oversee the implementation of the directives of the Higher Council. So this is also a way how you're kind of reconfiguring and restructuring the political system so that it is in a way centralized, but it is centralized and horizontally expansive. And therefore you have each state having a representative in the other states, but there's no one monopoly state that is that has monopoly over the other states. So if you have three, Syria, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and Yemen, you would have a minister. Yemen, you have two ministers, Yemeni ministers, in one in Egypt and one in Syria. But then, if Syria and Egypt are one, therefore you have one minister. And therefore, conversely, we'd have one Egyptian minister representing Syria and Egypt in Yemen, overseeing the implementation of the directives from the higher council. Okay, and the last point, إلغاء التمثيل السياسي بين الدول والأعضاء وتسري القواعد الجمركية الممثول بها في الدول الأعضاء على أن ينظم في الاتحاد الجمركي بينهما. What does this mean is that you would no longer have embassies of the different states. It would be you would dismantle the embassies. Probably what you substitute the office of the embassy would be the office of the minister who represents the state in the other state to oversee the implementation of the whole plan. So this is kind of a very advanced and forward-looking way of how you would merge states post Sykes-Picot configuration. They didn't. This experimentation didn't last very long, but it's significant that it happened, and therefore it's something that can be built upon if there's some future. Okay, so we've covered this. Now we can go back to the text at the beginning, and we can continue, or we can take a break. How are you? How's your stamina? And if you have any questions. Break for Hello, everyone back. How are we doing? Let me know when you Hada, when you'd like to begin. Hello. Is everyone back? Okay. Uh, can you hear me? Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, any questions from the first part before we go on further? Muhammad is typing a question. But until we get the question, we will begin at the second paragraph of the second page of the first article. Where was the leap in the causational sequence of the analysis of Arab nationalism? Oh, well, we haven't finished the article. So the same article that we began with, okay? All right. So on the third line from the second paragraph بحكي إنه في ركيزتين للقومية، أو الأمة العربية تقوم على ركيزتين. فكرة القومية العربية أيضا تقوم على ركيزتين، اللي هي اللغة العربية والإسلام التاريخي. وأيضا كما تذكر أريدك أن توضح ويقول أن الأمة لنا هذا. طيب، في the components of Arab nationalism here, according to one of the authors, is the language and Islam, the history of Islam, or historical Islam, which means what? Which means that then there's a context, a social and a cultural context apart from the religious aspect, which gives character to this region, as in contrast with, say, Europe or China or, say, the Americas. So there's a different culture here. And then we talk about, then after that, there's a referral to a French philosopher, وخلفية مقولة شهيرة للفيلسوف الفرنسي إرنست رينان. There's a misspelling or mistyping of the Ernest. It's as if Ernie Esternan. No, it's Ernest Renan. He's a French philosopher, and he did analysis on nationalism and what constitutes a nation. Okay, everybody with me? Fourth line. Okay, so what Renan's definition, or how he positions or defines the nation, يقول أن الأمة هي توافق مجموعة من الناس على ماض خادع أو ماض كاذب وعلى العداء للجيران. Okay, it's interesting here that Renan's definition of a nation has to do with a past that is fictional, or a past that is more than fictional. It's kind of it's a lie, and the confrontation being antagonistic with the neighbors. Now there's a problem with, yes, it's in the middle. Yeah, it's the fourth and fifth line of the second paragraph. Can you give me some ideas as why this would be problematic, or what is the problem with such a definition? Okay. Noor said that the idea would exist, wouldn't exist if both didn't. Okay. This point has more to do with the second part, which is having adversary. If you didn't have an adversary, you wouldn't be a nation. So therefore, a nation, according to Renan, is defined by who your opposition is, or who are your enemies. Okay. But with regard to the first part, if you don't have a past, then you kind of create a past, which is what he's kind of suggesting. Modern khadi' or modern kadhib. What is the problem of kind of this having a false past or a misleading past and depending on antagonists? Yes. Okay. He ignores common factors. There are several people typing, so I'll wait until we get fake identity. Yeah. Ala. Oh, he denies history. Yes. But he does more than deny history. He says that all history is false. Historical, because you are building the future depending on, yeah. And therefore, if your future is built on false past, then what is the trajectory of your future? It could be also a false future. Yeah, Tasneem, about the illusion of building your future. Yes, if you can convince a nation that their past is false, then you can convince them to build a false. It's easier to bring them in to build a future which is not theirs and which could be false. And here we're talking about the politics of having command of the past, present, and future. Being able to bring in the three together is a political activity in itself. That you emerge from the past, drawing and extracting the important lessons and the dynamics to understand where you are right now, and therefore by understanding more clearly where you are right now, you're able to progress in a more accurate way where you would want to be in the future. Now, if somebody else is redefining what your past is, therefore your future would not be yours. It would be somebody else's past definition of or what your past is. Now, this could make a problem. I'm just going to go over the comments. Who will create? Yeah, okay. There's a power. Yes, there's a power in response to Amal. There's a power in making your own, creating your future based on your history. And there's a power that you can derive from history. If one is able to derive something that makes you stronger and more insight, have more insight about where one wants to go. Yara, this would be a problem because European nationalism is somehow based on common history of Europeans. Yes, but Renan is yeah, there is a commonality, but then there is something that is different within each, which created nationalisms in the modern states in Europe. So therefore, you have the French nationality, so to speak, and the British, the German, the Danish, the Netherlands, Swiss, Austrian, etc., etc. impact on the case of especially Arab case. Well, maybe yes. There might be Ala talks about related to colonialism and the impact on the Arab case. And if there's Muhammad talks about causation, that there should be a causational relationship between the components which make a nation and its identity. Yes. Yes. But then how do you get out from the descriptive characteristic of nationalism, Arab nationalism, that it being its components being language history, a common language history, culture, and people sharing on the same land, as opposed to a created a past that is created or that is false. To employ means you have within the process. Okay, I will go on to explain. Renan, you know, Renan is French, yeah. Now the idea is that if you have if your past is false or untrue, means that that anybody can have a past, and anybody can create their past. Now this is very convenient for, say, colonizers or settler colonials who want to go to other places and to establish new states or new entities, political entities in place in the colonies. And therefore they claim that that the First Nations or the peoples they colonized, like the colonizers, the settler colonials, have no past, and therefore they begin a new past by actually activating a present in the new land. So how the settler colonials come, they say when those who came to the United States or Canada or Australia or New Zealand or in such settler colonial cases, those who came, they came escaping the problems of their mother countries. In Australia, it was not escaping. Australia was made to be the large prison of all the criminals from Britain. So therefore, the criminals in Britain were sent to Australia as punishment, and therefore they were administered, and they then practiced elimination of the Aborigines there. So it was, in a sense, convenient to have kind of such people kind of eliminating the Aborigines in Australia. Now, with the narrative, and you will find this a bit in Patrick Wolf's article about the elimination of in settler colonialism, is that the settlers say that, well, if you accept Renan's kind of definition that all pasts are false and they are lies, therefore they superimpose that or enforce that on the narrative or discourse of the First Nations or the peoples out there that are on the land that is being colonized. And therefore, one maneuver to try to equate settler pasts, false past, with the authentic past of the indigenous is to say that both pasts are lies. Now, when you have Benedict Anderson, I don't know if you've heard of him. Benedict Anderson has his book about imagined communities, and therefore one of the propositions, or it could be interpreted that he's kind of proposing that all communities are imagined based on their identity is sort of imagined, and therefore if the past and their present is also imaginations, and therefore what prevails in terms of whose imagination is the one who has more power to implement their imagination on the other. which has bearing to our case or our situation as Palestinians vis-a-vis the Zionists. So that the Zionists are claiming that we have no history, and that even if we have one, it's a lie, and therefore their history has more clout, not because it's a lie, but because they say it is from Scripture, from the Bible. But other settler colonials would say, who do not have direct access to, say, representation in scriptures or in holy books, they would say that, okay, you claim to be a nation and we claim to be a nation, and therefore when we as colonized rebuttal the colonizers, settler colonials, and say, what is your history? You said, we are creating our history. They would say, we are creating our history. So therefore our past is being created as we are manifesting our present. Okay, and therefore what we want to manifest in the future has to kind of reactivates the present and the past that we are creating all together. So there's a merge of all the past, present, and future, all compounded into one. And the point, the maneuver in the discourse is to try to, if Renan's definition of a nation is one that is is the pivot on which credibility of a nation is based on. Therefore, Renan says that all nations are false, or are based on false histories, which means that the colonizers can say that the First Nations or the peoples that are being colonized have false histories. Now, even if and it's important for the colonized to understand that this is not acceptable as a definition, because objectively, a nation has a people on a land or throughout a continuous existence on the land over time, and the interaction of time, people, and place, and the people themselves kind of develops this kind of nation characteristic, which is an objective way of viewing what nations are. So therefore, in the United States, you would have maybe more than 500 nations that were there before colonization. Now, here, whether you would say the Palestinians are a nation, given the context of pan-Arab nationalism, or what is to be an Arab in the collective sense, then you have things that need to be sorted out. But nevertheless, the Zionist kind of discourse is one that claims that we are both the Palestinians and the Israelis are ethno-nationals, and therefore each ethno-national has the right to interpret or to make up its future, and therefore if the Zionists have make up their past, so therefore if the Zionists have made up their false past, therefore the Palestinians' past is false by default. It's important for in the narrative and the rebuttal and this argumentation between the settler colonials and the colonized that the colonized maintain their authentic objective stance. Is that the point is not whether we are national, ethno-national according to your definition, but the point is that you are alien to this land, and you came to us who were already existing on this land, and therefore we have more authentic claim than what you imagine your claims to be. And this is important. This distinction is important. Otherwise, the colonial or settler colonial narrative or discourse tries to bring out the colonized from their historical context and provide them and put them on an equal footing, which would legitimize then the history and the presence and the future of the settler colonial, to the detriment and the disadvantage of the colonized, or the present and the future of the colonized. In an Orientalist discourse, which we shall deal with later on, this is a very political maneuver of knowledge discourse. and who has knowledge of what, and who has knowledge of whose past, and who claims monopoly of interpreting somebody else's past or the whole past of history. Just write this point, because we shall come to it in later sessions when we deal with Orientalism. Okay? Just to make sure, everybody with me? Okay. And the other aspect is that Renan defines now. To be fair to Renan, who is French, there is some there's some degree of relevance to what he says about having being defined by your opposition or by your enemy. Now, if Renan is a revolutionary according to the ethos and the rationale of the French Revolution, therefore, then you are in some ways you are defined by the surroundings. But it would be a very superficial definition of what the French Revolutionary Republic would be, because it then says that the French revolutionaries are only revolutionaries because they're against the monarchs of the surrounding region. And it would undercut and undermine, or even discredit the whole standing of why the revolution came, on the principles on which the revolution were based on, which is why I have attached after Aflaq's article, the Declaration of Rights of Civic Rights of August 26, 1789. The French Revolution is creating a new future based on a new principles of what the present is, and in that sense, it is rupturing itself from its past trajectory, and giving back claim to designing the present and future to the people, rather than to the absolute monarch. So in that sense, yet the French Revolution and the political thought of Rousseau and Descartes and Montesquieu and those who influenced the French Revolution has to do with the past, which was before the French Revolution happened, or in 1789. So therefore, there is a past in France which has to do with a revolutionary discourse about how the future could be, and details in Rousseau about how you would build a political structure which would maintain such a sequential and causational relationship of creating and constantly creating a revolutionary political system and people who are interactive with this revolutionary system. So in that sense, Renan would seem to be, while he's French, he would seem to be non-revolutionary in his he would be not seemingly with the French Revolution, because he is going about deciding the nation, even the nation of the Republic, which is not geographical predefined. It's rather principle predefined by the three principles of the French Revolution, which is fraternity, equality, and freedom. Liberté, fraternité, égalité. Yeah, the three principles of the French Revolution, which are pan-geographic or trans-geographic, which was which undermined the political systems and structure of Europe at the time, and hence the counter-revolution and the design, redesign, and reconstruction and production of nationalism, modern nationalism, the nationalism of modern European states during the 19th century, after the French Revolution and onwards. Okay, and then what else do we have? Then in the middle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. two lines from Renan, العداء والجيران. 2 lines down, there's a question. About أنا أقول أن القوميين العرب، يعني لو سألنا معظم المفكرين بين القوميين العرب على ماذا يتفقوا حول الأمة العربية، لقالوا إنها اللغة والإسلام. ولكن إذا عالجنا هذين العنصرين من ناحية تاريخية نجد أن اللغة والإسلام هما مادة خام، أي أن وحدهما لا يصنعان الأمة، وما يصنع الأمة هو التطور التاريخي والعنصر الثقافي والاجتماعي والاقتصادي والثقافي والتعامل مع العالم والتطورات العالمية. أما إذا عزلنا اللغة وعزلنا الإسلام واتخاذهما كعنصرين منفردين فلن نتوصل إلى أمة ولا القومية. طيب, so what is he saying here? It is saying that the language itself and the being of Islamic context is not enough to define a nation, the Arab nation. Although they are components of it, but they are not the ones that that produce a nation. And therefore, what produces a nation is the development of the historical, cultural, social, economic development, interaction, and the interaction with the world and the advancements in the world. Okay. And then if you remove these two, then you have neither قومية, which is nationalism, ولا أمة, which is a nation. Okay. What does this tell us? Yes, but it also it tells us, okay, it's they identify as thinkers that you cannot make a process from two characteristics. Something needs to generate a causation. You cannot just say that just because I speak Arabic and my culture is that automatically produces a nation in the modern sense. Yeah. It maybe defines you as a nation vis-a-vis other nations because you're different, what is similar or different, but it does not make you a nation with political agency. And to have political agency, therefore, you need to have a dynamic, a process, a process, a mechanism which enables you to become what you want to be as a definition, in the sense that you have agency, you have a role in defining who you are. It is not predefined by somebody else. And this is also the leverage which Orientalism has over whom it wants to orientalize. We will come to that later. But in the knowledge, how you know what you know, and whether your knowledge is your own making, or your own process of thinking is a very political act in itself. Yeah, and this is the point. And it is not enough to just go by adjectives and characteristics, because they do not give you the capability of addressing who you are. You're just kind of adding adjectives to what you are and what you are not. The other thing, what is more important or fundamental, is to be able to make your own, reshape and be part of developing your own identity in the active sense, in addition to the components that make you characteristically similar or different. What is the problem with Renan's definition of a nation composing of a false past and adversary towards? Yeah, this is what you mean who speaks Arabic and then he is Arab, Yeah, but then okay, but you can have people who are more Arab and do not speak Arabic in political in their political positions. They can be more authentic than speaking Arabic speaking Arabs, for example. So therefore, it is where the direction is, whether you're going for a deeper sense of identity or just who's speaking the language. Does it mean that if somebody learned Arabic at the university that he or she becomes an Arab just by learning the language? This is kind of the superficiality, which kind of, if you flip the coin, then you have me. If what makes you Arab is just speaking Arabic, then somebody who learns Arabic becomes an Arab. It doesn't. The logic is it doesn't work, or it's not kind of sequential, or it doesn't fit. Okay. Yes, and you can have Arab Christian, and you can have Arab Muslim, and you can have Muslim who is not Arab. So therefore, if you say have Indonesian, who are mostly Muslims, do you make them Arab just because they have this component, or do you make them Arab just because they recite the Quran in Arabic and therefore they become Arab? So therefore, when we go back to what makes a nation, it has to do with the people, how they interact, which is the language, but also the customs and the traditions, and also political systems, as well as being on the land, the same land at the same on the same time, and continuously interacting with one another, yeah, within the same region. Yani some Zionists would claim that the Palestinians came from Syria and therefore they are not authentic to this land. The response would be, well, yes, but we were within the region. With those who came from Syria or from Iraq, they came to this area. In addition to those who were already here, they came as part of a dynamic of interaction, as a part of a pre-state parceled Sykes-Picot configuration. So therefore, the coming to different locations within the same region is not as a settler colonial or a colonial project, whereas the Zionists come here as within the colonizing British and assume a settler colonial dynamic, which fulfills the strategies of the colony, and therefore that is the difference. Yeah. The other thing is that in order the settler colonial or immigrant societies cannot claim to be a nation if you're going that if your discourse or level or of your source of your definition is more grounded on people, on land, on time, and all interacting without renewing the composition of the people, the demographic composition of the people. Immigrant societies such as the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, they are constantly renewing the people who compose what they claim to be a nation. And therefore, this kind of continuity of the same people over time on the same place is constantly being kind of disrupted or interrupted. And therefore, while they claim to be nations, the settler colonial proposition of what constitutes a nation is different from what is actually in conflict with what First Nations of the North and South America and of other parts of the world that have been colonized are claiming. And therefore, it is important to maintain that kind of grounded on the objective compositions of what a nation is. Characteristically, and to maintain that, if you want to maintain that sort of nationhood within, and be able to withstand the political imposition of colonization, settler colonial, or globalization, or other forms of hegemony from the outside, you need to kind of be more instrumental and active in kind of maintaining and upgrading what it is to be a nation. Yeah. Then we come to after after the last line فهل نتوصل لا إلى أمة ولا إلى قومية إلى القومية. If you go down 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 lines down, you would see at the front of the line إن تعريف القومية يتم من ناحيتين. It's almost in the middle of the paragraph. Is everybody with me? Okay. So من ناحيتين. من الناحية الموضوعية أنه هناك مجموعة من الناس تتوافر بها عناصر معينة. هذه العناصر تصنع من هذه الأمة من هذه المجموعة أمة. هذا النوع من التعريف أنه مجموعة العناصر هي بتشكل الأمة. That the components of a nation are the ones that define a nation. And then there's another definition من التعريف التي هو التعريف الذي يدخل في موضوع التضاد اللي هو أنت أمة لأن هناك من يختلف عنك. And then the other component is that there is the counter, that for you there's always somebody who is a counter which makes you different, and therefore by the countering makes you defines you. وبالتالي لك خصوصيتك أنت، وهذا الأولى والناحية والثانية. عودا إلى ما نتحدث في البداية قضية الأساطير. الأساطير مهمة جدا في خلق الأمة. Okay. Now here there are 2 points that follow up from Renan. Is that okay? If you want to go on the superficial level, then you just go by the characteristics. And then if you want to have the second component, if you want to have a past, you create your past. So therefore, any created past is legitimate, even though it's a lie. And therefore, the problem is that if those who have real, authentic pasts would then be demoted to being lies, so as to come to the level of settler colonials who have pasts which are not, which have no past on the land, but they claim a past by having a mission, a divine mission, or a kind of a mission on this world built on other concepts and ideas and beliefs. Okay, so the mission is there. It becomes substitutes the gap of the past rather than actual past of them existing. And therefore, as the mission kind of moves on from the present to the future, therefore the mission itself becomes creating the past that is constantly being reactivated. And therefore, the settler colonial always, when we go to settler colonial systems and how they work, is that they from the beginning they say that they come with a better project than that is available, and they have a mission, and therefore but their history on the new land starts from a zero, or the timer which counts their presence on the colonized land begins at a certain point with a zero until they come, and then when they come, they kind of start living what they want the future of the land to be, and what their motivation is. What? Okay, can I have until 5:30? Okay, we'll finish at 5:30. I need to just cover a couple of points. Okay. And therefore, if you go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down, الذي تحدث عنه الدكتور يوسف الشويري في الكتاب سيجد أن عبد الله العلاني لا العلايلي يرفض قضية الإسلام بينما يتحدث عن موضوع الدين الطبيعي، العناصر التي تجتمع عليها الديانات جميعا، هذا تشكل في رأيه عنصر من عناصر قيام الأمة. Now, why is this important is that you remember when I gave you the definition from the Oxford Dictionary about nationalism, and it has a reference to man-made religion or new religions, which are social religions. So therefore, when they refer to Abdullah al-Alayli, it's as if he's trying to create a new nation with a new religion, which is a composition or a taking what is common in all religions and then providing that into what is the dynamic of a nation, which is an interesting point. On the page after that, I will just highlight the top paragraph on the fourth line. وهناك استدلال له علاقة بالنظرية القومية وتطورها النوع الأول في التاريخ خطي تاريخ خطي اللي هو تاريخ طبري. So here, if you are with me, here it's talking about تاريخ خطي, linear history that is linear. Why is this important? Because there are several ways of how you benefit from history or learn from history. The Tarikh al-Khatti refers to just saying what happened when, and then just reciting and describing the sequence of events. The other more sophisticated approach of history is kind of trying to understand what the dynamics are which are creating the causation in history. Okay? It is not written history. It's history الخطي بالخط, the line, and therefore how you enhance and develop and maintain a nation has to do with how you also what are your means of analysis of history and what it does. And to try to extract some sort of causation that is happening within history in the past. What made this event happen at this particular time? Why did it happen at this particular time? What were the dynamics that, if you were to remove one of the components of the dynamics, which would not produce a happening such as the French Revolution? French Revolution had several components which worked together to culminate into the French Revolution, which started with the seizing of the Bastille, which is the prison in which people were being held in. So therefore, there's a trigger, there's a critical trigger event which kind of unleashes or kind of unleashes the rest of the dynamics. And this need not be kind of premeditated or calculated from before. You can have the whole environment of a revolutionary environment ready to kind of take on. But it cannot be instigated. You need something to. Sometimes by chance it happens that something creates an event which then has a domino effect and catapults into other levels and regional levels, such as what the beginning of the Arab uprising, which began in Tunis by somebody burning himself because of protest of economic injustice. Yeah, and therefore how that what that meant then and how it spread is a trigger. Yeah, but the thing that is different is that in this region we had no kind of history of developing a revolutionary vision of the region. It was therefore the Arab uprisings were more liberal in the sense that they wanted change in acquisition of rights and more equitable distribution of opportunities within the existing states, and not to replace the political systems in the states themselves. But they were cornered into having into a position in which, in order to achieve change, they had to change the regime. But they had no historical reference or kind of a continuity of the production, of maintaining an agency, of being able to control. Then, after you come into power, how do you restructure by reference to what you have thought of before, rather than improvise on how you want to do things from scratch. In the other paragraph, you count in the middle of the paragraph, the second paragraph of page 3 of 6. There he talks about al-istibdad. That there was one other component of making nationalism or the nation in the Arab context was against despotism. But the problem is that if you read the second half of the paragraph, they developed the idea that despotism remained a kind of an ingredient of the awareness of people, and therefore the awareness of political systems, that political regimes try to enforce allegiance and loyalty to the system through despotism, which is one of the components that the evolution or development of the nationalism came against. Yet it kind of seeped into the political practice of the political systems that emerged. And this kind of idea of despotism, Khafaji also talks about it in his when he kind of analyzes this region. Okay. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's from the half of the second paragraph on page 3/6, when he talks about the العثماني ضد العثمانيين وضد الحكم العثماني وضد كل الاستبداد. Read the rest until the end, and then you will see that the despotism had a trigger effect as well. Is that those who wanted to claim equal rights or redistribution of wealth or more opportunities, they were it seems that they were subconsciously cornered into a liberal approach in which you want the despot regime to become a non-despotic regime, a democratic regime. So in this sense, rather than revolutionizing the whole Sykes-Picot configuration of the region, the despotism, it creates a reaction in which that those who want to have more claim of rights within the despotic system are actually calling for not regime change, but calling for modification and elimination of the despotism of the regime, but maintaining the same function of the regime, but in a more democratic way. And hence, this kind of line of thinking or discussion in this article, in which that the fourth phase of nationalism is that to be democratic, civic, focus on democracy, civil society, and rights and political rights, and equal justice for all. So this is kind of an indicator of what happens when you react to something at the face of it, and you think you want to remove a despotic or aggressive regime, or modify an aggressive regime, and can negotiate a transformation of the regime. You end up trying to, in the end, relying on the regime to be there, but in a different spirit of integration rather than tyranny. But you do not know. But if you're pushed into the advanced stage of having to rebuild the regime, you are incapable, and you do not have the tools, the historic tools, or even the analytical reference and ideological and thought theorizing tools to rebuild a system. Okay, which is one thing this kind of region lacks, or in the Arab world lacks. It's different, say, in some cases. Some cases have been able to rebuild, but it has taken more time. Okay, I think we will stop here. There will be, next time we will deal with Aflaq, Michel Aflaq's text, which comes after this article. And we will continue with this article beginning, and then we will go to Aflaq. I will also send you some pages, specific pages from Tarabishi, which you shall focus on particular themes. It will help you faster go over the readings without getting lost. I hope this was useful, and if you would like to give feedback how it was, anything that can be modified, I think we will try to next time do. We are obliged as academic staff to try to use the Zoom application of the university. So I will try to sort out that problem and be in touch with you before next week about whether it will be functioning or not. But be prepared that maybe next time we will be doing it through Zoom rather than Skype, because this is what is required of us as staff. Okay. I just hope that you are benefiting from this, even though it's very complicated and deep, but that it is worth your time. And في أمان الله, and be safe and be well. والله يحميكم. في أمان الله.